with a lot of content. But now there is a major challenge because we are going to have a panel chaired by Professor van der Duim with no less than 5 people in the panel. And we have half an hour. So I wish the chairman of the panel good luck.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I need that. Please, and Aleksandra, Senija, Dominique. Yeah. Okay, I've been making notes all day and been moving away from posing one question to half an hour ago. I thought of 3/4 of an hour ago. I thought, let's have a sort of design workshop. Let's design this route, getting all the inputs from people, from speakers, from people in the audience. I'm still tempted to do that, but we don't have time enough. But that would be my first recommendation, actually, to the Sultans Trail, to really rethink the Sultans Trail based on the input. What is the geopolitical context? What do we do with culture and arts, etc., etc.? What do we do with the idea of Dominique, of those chambers and nodes and networks, etc.? We're not going to do that, sorry, but there's not enough time. But I recommend to do that in the next session, in an open session, to do that. And that should be based on a lot of questions which I found interesting today. I found it, by the way, very interesting day. I learned a lot, but a lot of questions are still unanswered, are unclear, and they need to be answered to move forward. I highlighted at least 7 questions. And so we're not going to deal with it, but I still want to... one we can solve maybe soon and today is the difference between Kate's introduction, a trail is a trail, and Dominique's story about nodes and networks, etc. There was some tension in your remark, and I think we should solve that. So think about it, how we are going to solve that. That's the most easy question to but no, we will come back. Related to that, a much more fundamental question, I think, related to that, what the real mission is of the Sultans Trail. Is it indeed the development of a trail, a physical infrastructure? Is it regional economic development? Or are there much broader goals and broader aims, for instance, referring to the questions of Giet ten Berge? If you look at those questions, then all of a sudden it becomes a sort of ideological discussion about what this Sultans Trail is all about. So that would be another one. Another one, which is, I think, essential for the future of the trail, is how to attract more attention and support in the countries themselves. It's very nice, we have this discussion in Haarlem, we have representatives from the region, but it should happen there, and how to do that, how to organize that, etc. Related to that is the question, can we then look at the European Union, European Council, cost, horizon? Is that the way forward to mobilize that support? Or is that just wasting our time? And just a small example of that, Aleksandra, Senija, Max, and I, and 30 other people are working on a cost proposal. We worked for it a year. We had a very nice proposal. All reviewers we sent it to said, oh, that's a great proposal. And it was rejected just on 2 bureaucratic reasons. So we had to resubmit. It's a 3-year process only for a cost proposal. So for mobilizing this, is then European Union helpful, or is it just an obstruction to the whole process? Then we have a question already this morning, how to involve culture and arts, which I found very interesting to rethink. We discussed it yesterday also. Then there was a question, and that all relates to the questions I just posed. What about the name? And should the name be rethought? I think that can only be, that was your question, or who's posed that question? Yeah, that is unanswered. And I think before answering that, the other question should be answered. That's the end of the story. Is the name adequate or not relates to a lot of the other stories. And then finally, the question is, how is this all really influenced by the geopolitical circumstances in the Balkan and beyond? And I think what I heard, especially also from the experiences from those who walk the trail, well, if you walk the trail, it doesn't play a role. You enjoy the landscape, you enjoy the people, you enjoy the culture, etc. But in the development of the trail and the development of a cultural route, I think it's essential to take that into account. So that were some of the questions without answers I wrote down related to what I heard today. But maybe start with the first one to have a little bit of nice discussion about Kate, who started, come on, a trail is a trail, and all that theoretical blah, blah, blah about nodes and networks and flows. That misses the point. That was a little bit how I understood your remark. And maybe you can elaborate that, and maybe Dominique can.
Well, I think Dominique, I would like to say I was not attacking Dominique personally. I was attacking the quotation that she put into her presentation at the beginning, the Timothy and Boyd quotation, which I have not only heard from her, but from many other people, and which I regard as a load of old crap, to put it scientifically. Yeah, I've been developing trails for a long, long time, and the basis for a trail has got to be historical and physical. Otherwise, it's not really a trail. And the way that ancient societies constructed their trails was as routes of least resistance between choke points. And the choke point might be a bridge over a river, the only point where it was possible to bridge a river, a pass, a harbour or other physical feature. So by definition, a trail or a road is a physical construct. And this is the most important thing to bear in mind. Physical constructs which were then developed by adding stones, building walls, constructing walkways for animals, constructing bridges, providing water holes, and so on and so on. All our roads throughout the entire world were developed in this way. And some have never been developed. If you think of the Australian songlines, for example, they are still routes between choke points, if you like, points of interest, points of cultural or practical interest, but they are still routes and trails. And I think the first thing when you're developing a trail is to recognize that.
Fine, but then?
But then?
Because also related to my question about the mission of the trail,
yeah.
It's not only about developing a physical infrastructure. Yes. If it would be only that, how hard that still is.
Okay. Well, the first thing is to arrive at the best possible physical infrastructure. And this has got to be an infrastructure that is pleasurable to the walker, that makes them think about the foot they're putting in front of the other foot, that makes them actually want to put that foot in front of the other foot, to give them something around them, to some contact points with the environment, with local culture, with and to also to give the interpretation to those contact points. So the actual creation and interpretation of a trail is step by step. And it's a reiterative process that can be carried out over a space of time. Just because I walked this route in 2010, and this is the way I went, it doesn't mean it was the best way. And by 2020, I will have found a much improved way of doing it, which brings more to the person who's going to walk it in 2021 or 2022. And we're looking at this thing also from the point of view of our app now, and including things like snaps of soundscapes, you know, the noise of the birds at a particular point, the sound of a river at a particular point, and so on, to add this sort of experience into the use of a route. I think that is very important. The only other thing I should say is on this question of developing the best possible physical route is if the local people are saying, no, we don't want you, it's not the best possible physical route, and you have to reroute and find a village where you are wanted.
Dominique, you want to...
Yes, of course. To some extent, I didn't see too much of a contradiction there, in a sense that in the definition, one is the definition you do not like. One is focusing on the fact of putting things together, of linking and of bundling things. And to some extent, I agree with you that the basis is physical. It's like if you want, apart from a trail, if you want to develop a region in economic geographical terms, one always says, start with your infrastructure. Your infrastructure, your roads, your railroads, etc. should be good. It's a premise to have this development, but it's not enough. You have to build. And this is exactly what I wanted to say, and that also Timothy and Boyd want to say. You have a physical network, but it's not enough to develop. You need the people behind it. You need the people, local people, collaborating to produce something that gives this trail not only some sense, some theme, some subject to work on. So I think that the historical element is important, but again, it's not enough. It's like, and I'm using the challenging thought of a former colleague from the University of Groningen, Greg Ashworth, saying that something is important because it's historical does not make it heritage. It's only heritage if it makes sense for the present-day generations to use and to see what you can do with it. So to some extent, my point of view is, yes, completely agree with you that the basis might be a physical trail, but you have to build on top, and build on top is the community for which this physical as well as historical value makes sense.
Disagreement, or is there no disagreement anymore? Did we solve the problem?
No. The physical is the basis of the whole thing, because if you use any network of rural roads, historical or non-historical, newly created or old ones, along them you will find communities, and all these communities want tourism. It is only by identifying the best possible network that will attract the customers to walk, because your trail is the right combination of difficulty, the right combination of viewpoints, the right combination of features along the route, and so on and so on. You have to include a surprise every day. That is very, very important. Now, you can't just pick up any network and include a surprise. But there has to be a surprise every day, I tell you.
Is anybody else who wants, and Sedat, do you want to react to it? Because I still see two different views in how to develop and how to move forward in this endeavor.
I'm not disagreeing with the long-term aim that you have to, once you've identified this route, that you have to develop it in some way. But what I am saying is that the discovery of the route is the absolute key to future success.
That's true too, because we are also creating with the route. So you go first, you make an initial drawing, you walk and you walk again and you walk again, and finally you find a way which you think is the best way to walk from one place to another, or cycle one place to another.
And you validate it with the local people. You
Most.
talk to the local people and say, if you were going from A to B, how would you go?
Yes, but eventually when you're finished with this process, but then you come at the domain of Dominique, then you have to specify the nodes and you have to specify the points of interest. So I see no conflicting.
In the process of time, there's a difference.
Because you have the process of time, and then Dominique comes at a later stage than the route developers.
Yeah.
And then you need to create the spaces, you need to create the interest places, you need to create all this.
Okay, let me put it in a different way, and that was including in my summary and questions. You developed the route in a technical, physical way, and nobody's interested in the region. So why are you developing the route? It's just to satisfy some Dutch and German hikers and bikers? Is that the reason to develop this route? Or are there larger, more complex reasons to do it? And we wait for that. We wait 5 or 10 years for that, and we have the route, and then we see what happens.
May I reply for this? Okay, thank you. To connect to these issues, you connecting to the Sultans Trail initiative, you have lots of routes in the area, Roman routes, Ottoman routes. Mostly everything is going in the same way because all of them are trying the best way to reach the destination, the exact location of some use military route or any trade route or anything. They were utilized constantly. But now we have, in a modern time, we have abandonment of the large rural spaces where the routes are coming, and you have no population there anymore. You're struggling with the management of these kinds of historic routes because they are growing. Max experienced that in Serbia and Bulgaria as well on this summer trip, because we have lots of routes, and the newly developed modern routes are not following these historical routes to the same. They are following some closely, but trying to find new infrastructure. So you have a lot of remains of traditional routes, true routes, Sultans Trail route, Roman routes through different sections. There is no connection in the Sultans Trail towards Bosnia. There are no evidences where the Bosnian track went to the Italy and this Mediterranean area. There was traced as well. But these are not involved. So you have lots of links in different ways, and you have to choose to develop the first one, and then you have to develop others that are attractive as well, they contain. So it has a development process, but you have to know the situation in the local community, what is happening, and if you will have the support that you need for the development. If you don't have people, you can invest, but invest will be with no results. In a few years, when the population is totally gone to the city, everything will grow again.
Okay, before is there a reaction from question, please? Because I'm standing here because I want you to be involved as much as possible. So please.
My problem a little bit with the whole tourism discourse during my PhD, it was always my problem that it's going on in a framework on a very materialist way. We are talking about the roads and we are talking about consumers. We are talking, but a road is not only a historical evident relict. Talking about the road, and if you are talking with pilgrims, they are always talking about the road in a metaphoric way. And I think that's something what's also real. And I think that, for instance, Derek Tidball has understood that very well. I had a lot of discussion about that with my promoter, but I refuse only to see a road, a way as a touristic object. Anyway, talking about tourism and peace, so interesting. 2 years before the corona, we had almost an uprising in Amsterdam against tourism.
Okay, we leave that. That's another discussion. I would leave that out because about under-tourism and over-tourism, let's leave it. But Dominique, then I come to Tom.
I'm very eager to answer that because, with all respect, I think that this view on tourism is really a view that does not exist anymore nowadays. It's not because you present tourism as a lever for development. It's not tourism for tourism, it's a lever for development. So you are aiming to develop tourism at the benefit for the local community. So it's not like you focus on...
Exactly the reason that many people from developing countries have big problems with tourism.
Yes, and one of the reasons is why this kind of development, without taking the local community into concern, if you develop this kind of a product like a trail, is that many of this kind of products are not developed by experts, because nowadays you cannot imagine a tourism education program that is not stressing exactly on this, that you cannot develop a sustainable tourism product only looking at the physical, but that the bottom-up involvement, and therefore I do not agree with this stage. From the very beginning, the local community has to be involved in the development. If they do not agree, there will be no trail, but so what? Rather have this than a trail that is developed first, not supported by the community, not having any ownership and disappearing afterwards, as our colleague said.
Yeah, I just, Kate, you started to develop tracks, but you must have realized the track is there because in the past, before that it was there, people had some reason to make that particular track. So the reason may not be there anymore. So then you develop historical tracks which are for tourism, etc. And you don't need to answer all the difficult questions which we dealt with today, I think. Some of them. I imagine in this field now that Sedat, there was no Sultanstrail. And why was he thinking about there should be a Sultanstrail? Because he walked the Camino twice, and then he got the idea there should be something to the east. But that's not based, that is not based on the idea there in the past, 2,000 years ago, there was a track. No, the idea is morally, ethically, etc. to start it. I'm sure about that. That
Yeah,
must
can
have
I?
been behind
Yeah.
the idea to start this.
Yeah. I'm not saying that there is no founder's vision. Sedat had a founder's vision. When I developed the Licking Way, I had a founder's vision, if you like. I thought that Turkey needed a long-distance walking route because I'd walked trails in France and Spain and all the rest of it, but not the Camino at that stage. To start with, you have to limit your area of exploration because you know that you can't create a trail from X to Y because, for example, Y has absolutely no communication. It finishes at the top of a mountain. And how are you going to get the tourists home again at the end of it? So there are certain practical constraints that you have to define at the beginning. But once you've defined those practical constraints, your limits they should be governed by historical factors. And one way of identifying the historical input to your trail Go and talk to a shepherd. And that is what I did for creating the Viking Way, for example. I talked to shepherds and shepherds and shepherds and shepherds until they got fed up with me. And they knew not only their own tracks and the routes they used, they knew the routes that people had used in previous generations, and they knew the points of interest along the routes. And they would ask me what old inscriptions said, you know, and should I dig here for treasure? Yeah, and so on. Sedat knows this very well.
Okay. Also following up the remark just made, in my view, there's an implicit or maybe explicit idea that if we want to involve the communities and the regions alongside the trail, we have to do it through tourism to make an economic incentive that they are getting interested in the route. First of all, I think, summarizing well. Well, is that a good way forward? Is that the way to really get interest in? And maybe, Klaske, maybe you can. There's another way, or not? Culture and arts, and that doesn't have to be tourism per se, is it? Can you respond to that? So, let's say the hypothesis is okay. We can only mobilize communities and regions along the route to give them an economic incentive, and that's tourism. That is the sort of thing behind. But there are maybe other ways. Or can you reflect? No. Can you reflect on it or not?
No, I can. I mean, it.
But I think this morning your contribution is very important. Something we have been thinking about also yesterday in preparing the European proposal. Indeed, give more emphasis to arts and culture as a tool.
No, I mean, I think tourism is crucial. Huh? So I think you have to draw on different means. Because I think tourism gives financial possibilities, it gives people employment, it gives people a reason, you know, to participate. So I would say it's actually very relevant to all of this. But I do think, indeed, you can also draw on what's already existing, alongside the routes, amongst the communities that are already working, for example, on debating the contested histories at play, or to bridge, you know, make bridges that do not exist yet, where you see that civil society organizations are working very hard through performances, through art, through culture, you know, there are many things in place that you can draw on. And I think what you need to do with the route, no matter what, is draw on all these possibilities. Something that I've heard a lot, I mean, I heard it a bit in the last presentations as well, there seems to be an assumption that peace and reconciliation can be constructed. And I would say you need to move away from that and think about how can we, in the best possible way, facilitate this and hope that might be the end result of probably years and years of investing in such a route. And there tourism is relevant, but also these projects that are already there, and I would say really try to find out what is at stake in those communities. And I think it was you, Senija, that came up with the example of Mostar, of all these. You have several initiatives that try to say, sort of also prove, you see, we invest in reconciliation. But Mostar, of course, it's a divided city. And a cultural center like Čaučević or quite a few other initiatives use different approaches. You have to sort of, I think about the several ways in which to do that. And culture and arts, theater, different ways of creating inclusive spaces alongside the route will be key.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something relevant to this discussion, is that we are talking about communities all the time, but the communities are disappearing. For instance, in Croatia, the country had 3.7 million in 2012. Now it's 3.7 million. Now it's 3.2 million. 500,000 people have migrated already. And the particular migration is through the area where the Sultans Trail goes. So you lost the community. So what kind of community we are talking about? The community which stayed is the community who is linked to the political party, HDZ. And it's very corrupted, and it's very difficult to engage with the community. So the communities need to be saved. And tourism might be an initiative to save the community, to save against the migrations, because the life in the cities is not that fun. So how to, maybe there are the visions of like having this €1 houses as they did in Sicily on those trade routes, try to engage in agriculture because there is a lot of fertile land which is abandoned. In the current situation of the crisis of the wheat can't go from Ukraine to Europe, why don't we have our own? Because there is no one to work on those lands. So that is the link we need to make with the communities, and something like a tourism trail, like Sultans Trail, or whichever way we want to call it, might be the first point to start attracting people to this area. Because it is quite important for the benefit of not only that area, but the Europe in general.
Okay. Before, time is running out, before I close the session, I have one final very practical question for you, so be prepared. Is there another question, a burning question from someone who, no? Sorry, a last remark, okay.
I fully agree with Senija. I think this is reality, huh? And you can have great initiatives, but if there's no community, what do you do? But I also think, and I think it was you, Kate, that mentioned the environment or climate at a certain point, and Bosnia is, I think, a typical case where you see now that communities are formed on the basis of concern about, for example, the river Una, or and this is all over the region. We see that climate and a changing climate is a force that binds communities in a shared concern. And I think this is also something that can be used for these routes. Think about what are the themes, and very often it's not necessarily the heritage or the culture. Well, it's relevant, but it's of a different kind of relevance than sometimes the fact that you see that your river is polluted. And the river crosses countries, and it probably crosses countries along the Sultans Trail. And this is just one example, but I do think this is a way also of moving beyond that very local community, but really draw people together in a shared concern, which can be, I think, related to something like a trail, bringing in different kinds of people.
I would just like to say that trails are infrastructure. You can put on them what you like. You can put on them bird watching or environmental protection or pilgrimage or whatever you like. But from the point of view of the local people that are living along the trail, think of the Maslow triangle. These people at the bottom, there's possibilities for agriculture are dropping away as climate change. Yeah. Their children are migrating to the cities. Their possibilities of finding a new field in which to earn a living are limited probably to tourism and almost nothing else. So you are feeding in, by constructing this infrastructure, to the bottom of the Maslow triangle. Pilgrimage is at the top. We haven't got there yet.
Okay. Yeah, see Tom, so...
Can you find 2 sentences for conclusion?
No, I can't. What I did, I posed 7, 8 questions to be answered by the Sultans Trail Foundation, and I proposed something, and I think we can talk about it days and years and whatever, but we can also design. We can also take those questions on board, and with a group of people with this map. Yeah, okay, yeah. What are we talking about in reality? What communities are we talking about? What regions are we talking about? What kind of non-hike and bike type of attractions could be included? Are there groups of culture and art which we already know who we could identify and take along? And then, of course, also your questions about what is wrong with the physical infrastructure and what. But we have someone who is walking the route now, so he can identify all those physical problems. He is looking for?
Angels.
For angels, yeah. Well.
Two sentences. Yeah. The first sentence is that we have to leave the building at 6 o'clock. Otherwise Otherwise, you have to still pay a little bit more for this beautiful building. And I think we need, that's all part of the first question, we need a drink also, because we are exhausted. The second, it's not a question, but the second line is that there has been so much harvest in ideas, suggestions, etc., from all sources of the people who spoke here, that I think we have to rethink that fundamentally, and we cannot do that now. And we will put out a track that the chair has the task to do so, to find a discussion place to try to solve all those questions. The third remark also is a remark and not a question. All speakers are really thanked to the bottom of our hearts, if hearts have bottoms. And they will have a little present at the end before they leave. And I want especially to thank our chairperson of today, because he has been showing himself again in the old tradition of being able, like a politician, to run a meeting and to draw conclusions, to put silence to someone who is too long, and to invent another person for the discussion if he thinks that that person has the good arguments. I propose a big applause for Jan Pronk. Well, Sedat, you have to conclude, I think. I opened it, you have to conclude.
Now, thank you all. It was a great and fantastic day, because I dreamt of this day about 10 years ago. And then Tine came along and she brought Ton. And then all of a sudden I saw my dream come into reality. And I realized that you need to have dreams, but mostly you need to have people like Ton who are hands-on and doing things and bringing people together and making this day happen. Thank you, Ton. Yeah. And we have also a small present for you.
Oh.
I wanted to buy an olive tree, but the shop was closed. The olive tree is a symbol of peace.
Ah, this is really beautiful.
No olive tree, but nice flowers.
Yeah, but the origin must be found, I think, somewhere on the Lycian way. Isn't it?